In a luxurious mansion, surrounded by lush gardens and boasting a breathtaking city view, lived a man who had everything money could buy. Ricardo, a middle-aged millionaire, had built his empire from scratch with tremendous effort and dedication. His success was enviable, and his fortune immeasurable. Ricardo had 2 children, Lucas and Mariana, who, unlike him, grew up immersed in comfort and luxury. They attended the best schools, wore the most expensive clothes, and were always surrounded by friends and glamorous parties. Lucas, the eldest at 25, had an insatiable taste for sports cars and extravagant travels. Mariana, at 23, spent her days at spas, boutiques, and social events, flaunting her privileged lifestyle on social media. For Ricardo, who had experienced the harshness of life before achieving success, his children's ingratitude and superficiality were a constant source of concern. He vividly remembered the days when he had to struggle for every penny, working humble jobs and saving every coin. His children, however, seemed incapable of understanding the value of hard work and empathy for the less fortunate. One evening, as they dined together in the mansion's immense hall, Ricardo watched Lucas and Mariana animatedly discussing their upcoming trips and shopping sprees. He noticed their indifference towards the household staff and the disdain in their words when discussing world issues. Pained his heart. Despite all the love and care, he felt he had failed to instill in them the essential values he cherished so deeply. It was at that moment, while looking at his children's happy yet empty faces, that Ricardo made a drastic decision. He needed to find a way to teach them what truly mattered in life. Something that would make them realize the importance of humility, gratitude, and empathy. Little did Lucas and Mariana know that their lives were about to change forever, and that the most valuable lessons often come from the least expected places. As time passed, Ricardo's family values decayed more and more visibly. Lucas and Mariana, in their world of luxury and extravagance, showed increasing disdain for the needs and feelings of others. Their days were filled with an endless sequence of superficial pleasures and selfish indulgences. Lucas, with his charm and charisma, was often the center of attention at the most exclusive parties. He spent fortunes on luxury cars, expensive drinks, and high-stakes casino bets. His reputation as a spoiled playboy spread, and he seemed proud of it. Mariana, on the other hand, was a constant presence in social columns, her face plastered on fashion magazines and gossip websites. She surrounded herself with people who flattered her but rarely were true friends. Arguments in Ricardo's mansion became frequent and heated. The servants, once treated with respect, were now seen as mere objects, tools to satisfy the whims of the young heirs. Lucas demanded immediate attention and perfection in all services, tolerating no mistakes or delays. Mariana, in turn, criticized the appearance and efficiency of the staff, often publicly humiliating them for minor failures. Ricardo, who always believed in treating everyone with dignity, watched it all with a growing sense of failure. He had provided his children with every opportunity to be better people, but now he saw that money and privilege had corrupted their souls. They were becoming exactly the kind of people he had always despised: superficial, arrogant, and insensitive. The situation reached a critical point when, during a lavish party at the mansion, Lucas and Mariana refused to help a longtime family friend who was going through financial difficulties. Ricardo, incredulous, listened as his children scorned the idea of helping someone they considered a failure. They didn't see the friend as a human in need, but as a stain on their perfect image of wealth and success. That night, after the party ended, Ricardo stood alone in the empty hall, surrounded by echoes of laughter and music still resonating through the walls. He realized that something had to change drastically. His children needed to understand that true wealth wasn't in money or status, but in the ability to empathize, to connect with humanity, and to be grateful for what they have. With a heavy heart, he began to formulate a plan that would change their lives forever, hoping to reclaim the values he had once dreamed his children would possess. With a heavy heart and a restless mind, Ricardo spent sleepless nights pondering how he could reclaim the values his children had lost. He knew that words were no longer enough. He needed something more impactful, an experience that could touch Lucas and Mariana's hearts in a way no conversation or lesson could. It was then, in the solitude of a late night, that a daring and risky idea occurred to him. Ricardo decided he would disguise himself as a homeless person and live on the streets. He believed that only this way could his children truly understand the value of humility and empathy. The plan was audacious and fraught with uncertainties, but Ricardo was determined. He knew that only a radical transformation could open Lucas and Mariana's eyes to the realities they were ignoring. First, he began to physically prepare for the transformation. He let his beard and hair grow and started wearing old, worn-out clothes. He wanted to become unrecognizable, just another face among the many who lived on the streets, invisible to society. In secret, he started studying the places where homeless people gathered, the shelters, and the streets where they spent their nights. The more he researched, the more convinced he became that this was the only way to save his children. Before disappearing, Ricardo wrote a letter and left it in his office safe, with instructions for it to be delivered to Lucas and Mariana only if something happened to him. The letter explained his decision and his reasons, revealing the deep love he felt for them and his hope that through this experience, they could become better people. On the night before his departure, Ricardo organized a family dinner. Lucas and Mariana, as usual, were distracted with their own affairs, barely noticing their father's presence. Ricardo watched them with a mixture of sadness and determination, aware that this would be their last dinner together for a while. After the meal, he bid farewell to his children with a tight hug, holding back tears and anxiety. The next morning, Ricardo left the mansion before dawn, with only a backpack on his back and a few bills in his pocket. He walked through the still dark streets of the city, feeling the cold breeze and the loneliness that would now be part of his new reality. Finding his new temporary home, a square in the city center, he sat on a bench, looking up at the stars still shining in the sky. In that square, Ricardo mingled with the other homeless people, listening to their stories and sharing their pains. Each day brought new challenges and difficulties, but also a profound sense of purpose. He was determined to endure it all, knowing that this experience, however harsh, was necessary to open his children's eyes and transform their lives. And so, Ricardo began his new life on the streets, while Lucas and Mariana, unaware of their father's sacrifice, continued their routines of luxury and extravagance. Little did they know they were about to face the greatest lesson of their lives, a lesson that would forever change how they saw the world and themselves. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in a soft orange hue as Ricardo took his first step as a homeless man. His heart beat fast, not from uncertainty about what lay ahead, but from determination to carry out his plan. He felt every detail of this new journey: the rough texture of old clothes against his skin, the light weight of the backpack on his back, and the morning cold that seemed to pierce through his body. Ricardo walked the city streets, carefully observing the world he had often ignored from inside his luxury car. The dirty sidewalks, the tired looks of passers-by, and the invisible faces of the homeless starting to move to find a safe place for the day. He chose a quiet alley where he could settle without immediate notice. There, he began his physical and emotional transformation. Slowly, Ricardo ceased to be the successful millionaire and became just another man lost in the crowd. He found an old can and used it as a seat, watching the flow of people passing by without so much as a glance at him. Every detail of his disguise was meticulously planned. His hands, once well-kept, were now dirty and calloused. His face, always cleanly shaved, now sported a thick, unkempt beard. His gaze, once firm and confident, was now weary and resigned. The first few days were the toughest. Ricardo faced the biting cold of nights out in the open, the hunger gnawing at his stomach, and the indifference of people who passed by him as if he were invisible. He experienced firsthand what it was like to be ignored, to feel helpless and vulnerable. He slept on park benches, covered by newspapers and cardboard boxes, trying to find some comfort amidst adversity. Despite the hardships, Ricardo found solidarity among the other homeless people. They shared life stories, pains, and hopes. He met Jose, a former teacher who had lost everything after a bitter divorce. Maria, a young woman who had fled from an abusive home, and Carlos, a war veteran struggling with ghosts from the past. These people, often forgotten by society, showed Ricardo the strength of human resilience. Ricardo began to understand that his experience was not only a lesson for his children but also a personal transformation. Each day on the streets brought him new perspectives and a deeper understanding of what it means to live with so little. He learned to appreciate small acts of kindness, like a shared piece of bread or a friendly conversation around an improvised fire. One night, while trying to sleep in the shelter of an abandoned building, Ricardo reflected on the journey that had brought him there. He knew he was just beginning to uncover the true hardships of homeless life. Yet, at the same time, he felt more alive and connected to his humanity than ever before. It was a complete transformation that went beyond appearance and touched his soul. Ricardo was determined to continue. He knew that by undergoing this experience, he would not only reclaim the values he wanted to teach his children but also become a better person. And so, each sunrise brought a new opportunity to learn, grow, and eventually, change the lives of Lucas and Mariana in ways they could never imagine. The day was particularly cold, and the city seemed enveloped in a mist that turned every corner into a mystery. Ricardo, now accustomed to the harshness of street life, wandered through the downtown in search of a place where he could warm his hands and perhaps find some food. He had spent the night in a crowded shelter, torn between the noises of a city that never sleeps and the uncomfortable silence of his new reality. As he walked along the main avenue, his attentive and calloused eyes noticed a group of young people coming out of a luxurious cafe. It was the kind of place he and his children used to frequent before his transformation. Ricardo felt a tightening in his chest as he recognized, amidst laughter and lively conversations, the faces of Lucas and Mariana. They were accompanied by friends, their expensive clothes and carefree expressions a stark contrast to the surroundings. Ricardo hesitated for a moment, his heart racing and mind filled with doubts. He knew this encounter could be an opportunity, but he also feared being discovered before the right moment. He decided to follow the group from a distance, observing every move of his children as they walked carelessly through the bustling streets. Lucas and Mariana seemed oblivious to the world around them, immersed in their superficial conversations about travels, shopping, and parties. Ricardo felt a mix of sadness and determination. He needed them to see reality in a way they had never seen before. However, fate had its own plans. When Lucas and Mariana decided to enter a clothing store, Ricardo approached the spot where a group of homeless people gathered to share some hot coffee and bread donated by a charitable bakery. With a sad smile, he accepted a cup of coffee and started talking with Jose, the former teacher, and Maria, the young woman who had run away from home. Their voices blended with the city buzz, creating a contrast between the simple life of the homeless and the luxury he had once been part of. It was at that moment, while Ricardo listened to the stories of his new friends, that Lucas and Mariana emerged from the store, carrying bags full of expensive clothes. As they passed by the group of homeless people, Mariana gave a look of disgust and made a comment to Lucas, who laughed. Ricardo felt a pang of pain, but he stayed strong. He knew there was still a chance to touch his children's hearts. Lucas, always impulsive, stumbled and dropped one of his bags. The clothes scattered on the dirty ground, and he, annoyed, started swearing. That's when Jose, with his usual calmness, bent down to help gather the pieces, offering a gentle smile. Lucas looked at him with disdain but accepted the help, albeit reluctantly. Ricardo watched the scene, his heart pounding. He saw the opportunity arise when Maria, noticing the situation, offered a word of comfort to Lucas. Things don't always go as planned, but we can always count on the kindness of strangers, she said with sincerity that made Lucas hesitate for a moment. Mariana, impatient, pulled Lucas by the arm, and the two started to walk away, but something in those words seemed to have planted a seed of doubt in Lucas' eyes. Ricardo, hidden among the other homeless people, knew that this small interaction was just the beginning. He would continue to follow his children closely, waiting for the right moment to reveal his true identity and the lesson he hoped to teach them. That night, as the homeless gathered around an improvised fire, Ricardo looked up at the starry sky and felt a wave of hope. The unexpected encounter with his children had revived his determination. He was on the right path, and with patience and love, he believed he could transform Lucas and Mariana's hearts, showing them the true value of empathy and humanity. Ricardo woke up before dawn, his body sore from the hard, cold ground where he had slept. The sky was still dark, and the morning air was cold and sharp. He rose slowly, stretching his stiff muscles, and looked around. The square was quiet, with only a few homeless people beginning to stir. His disguise was working, but the reality of street life was harsher than he had ever imagined. The first weeks were a test of physical and emotional endurance. Ricardo experienced hunger in a way he had never felt before. The few coins he managed to beg for were insufficient to buy more than a simple, sparse meal. He quickly learned the best places to find leftover food: dumpsters behind restaurants and bakeries that discarded bread and pastries from the previous day. Every piece of bread, every sip of coffee, was a small victory against hunger. The cold was another relentless enemy. Ricardo tried to keep warm with layers of old clothes, but many nights were spent shivering, huddling for any warmth he could find. He began to understand the silent solidarity among the homeless. They shared blankets and clothes, dividing what little they had without expecting anything in return. It was a brotherhood forged in adversity, and Ricardo felt humbled by the generosity of those who had nothing. One of the most impactful experiences was the sense of invisibility. Ricardo, used to being noticed and respected, was now ignored by most people who passed by him. The few who stopped to look did so with disdain or pity, but never with genuine empathy. He felt firsthand what it was like to be treated as less than human, just another shadow in the urban landscape. This invisibility made him reflect on all the times he himself had ignored those in need. Violence and danger were also part of daily life. Ricardo witnessed fights over sleeping spots, saw friends assaulted by gangs, and was himself a victim of robberies. Each day on the streets was a struggle for survival, and he began to develop a resilience he never knew he had. Jose and Maria became his protectors and guides, helping him navigate the traps of street life with wisdom gained through years of experience. Yet, there were moments of unexpected beauty that kept him hopeful. Conversations around an improvised fire, shared laughter over stories from the past, and the occasional kindness of a stranger offering a meal or a comforting word. Ricardo found strength in the homeless community, a strength that gave him the determination to continue with his plan. On a particularly cold afternoon, Ricardo sat at the entrance of a closed store, trying to shield himself from the cutting wind. A young woman passed by him, paused, and returned with a look of concern. She knelt down and handed him a sandwich and a blanket. "I hope this helps a bit," she said, her eyes full of compassion. Ricardo felt tears well up, not just from the kindness of the gesture, but from the hope it carried. There was still goodness in the world, and he believed that this kindness could touch the hearts of his children. Each day on the streets was a new lesson, a new opportunity to understand the depth of the human experience. Ricardo knew he was becoming a different person, stronger and more empathetic, and he hoped, with all his heart, that Lucas and Mariana could also learn these lessons, not just through words, but through the changes they would begin to see in their own father. Ricardo continued to live his double life, a millionaire in the shadows and a homeless man in the daylight, waiting for the right moment to reveal his truth. He knew there was still a long way to go, but each day of struggle on the streets brought him closer to his goal, to transform the hearts of his children, and perhaps his own. Ricardo was sitting in his usual corner of the square, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the concrete. He gazed at the horizon, lost in thought, when Jose approached and sat down beside him. Jose, the former teacher with a gentle soul and quiet wisdom, had become a friend and confidant during these difficult days. They shared stories of their past lives, shattered dreams, and renewed hopes, creating a connection that transcended the circumstances that brought them together. "Have you ever thought about how all of this brought us here?" Jose asked, looking at the trees swaying gently in the wind. Ricardo nodded, reflecting on the paths that led him to the streets and on the plan that was still unfolding. "I never thought I would find so much humanity where I least expected it," Ricardo replied. He remembered the early days of fear and loneliness, and how those emotions had been replaced by a deeper understanding of life and the silent kindness of other homeless people. Maria joined them, carrying a bag of apples she had received from a local donation. Her warm smile lit up her dirty, tired face. "Let's share these," she said, sitting down next to Ricardo and Jose. They passed the apples among themselves, each bite a small reminder of the generosity that still existed, even in the most adverse situations. It was in these moments of simplicity and sharing that Ricardo began to realize the true richness of human connections. He listened to Maria talk about her childhood, the hardships she had faced, and the small moments of joy she found in everyday life. Jose, in turn, shared stories of his years as a teacher, of the students he had inspired and the challenges he had overcome. One night, around an improvised bonfire, Ricardo and the other homeless gathered to hear Carlos's story, the war veteran. He spoke of his years in service, the friends he had lost, and the invisible scars he carried. Carlos's words were raw and painful, yet filled with resilience and hope. Ricardo felt a lump in his throat, amazed by the strength these men and women possessed, even after everything they had been through. These stories, shared over sips of bitter coffee and bites of simple food, created a fabric of shared experiences that connected Ricardo to these people in a way he had never experienced before. He saw beauty in each one's vulnerability, in their willingness to open their hearts and share their pains and joys. One afternoon, while helping to distribute soup at a shelter, Ricardo met Anna, a volunteer who dedicated her time to helping the homeless. Anna was a woman of vibrant spirit, full of compassion and determination. They talked at length about their motivations and what drove them to continue, despite the difficulties. Anna inspired Ricardo with her dedication and desire to make a difference, and he began to see in her a reflection of what he hoped his children could become. In each of these encounters, Ricardo felt a silent transformation happening within himself. He realized that true connections were forged in empathy, in the sharing of experiences, and in mutual understanding. These relationships, built on the streets, were becoming the foundation of his new worldview. Ricardo knew he still had a long way to go, but these connections gave him the strength and hope needed to continue. He was determined to take these lessons back to his children, hoping they too could discover the beauty and depth of true human connections. And so, each day on the streets was not just a fight for survival, but a journey of discovery and transformation. A journey he knew was only just beginning. Ricardo watched the city lights come on as night fell, preparing himself for another night on the streets. The routine was becoming familiar, but that didn't mean he had fully grown accustomed to it. Each day brought new challenges, discoveries, and a growing sense of disconnection from the life he had once known. That night, sheltering in a dark alley, Ricardo reflected on how his perspectives had shifted since he began his journey as a disguised homeless man. He thought about the luxuries he used to take for granted: a warm bed, a hearty meal, the security of a home. Now, those things seemed distant and unattainable. The confrontation with reality was constant. Ricardo faced the harshness of the streets every day, the lack of hygiene, the fear of violence, the uncertainty of tomorrow. He wondered how he had ignored the reality of the less fortunate for so long, how he had allowed himself to become so detached from the struggles so many faced daily. Over the weeks, Ricardo witnessed stories of pain and despair among the homeless around him. He met people who had lost everything due to circumstances beyond their control: illness, unemployment, devastating divorces. Each story was a painful reminder of life's fragility and the injustice that permeated society. One of the hardest moments was when Ricardo saw a homeless friend, a kind man who had shared meals and life stories, succumb to pneumonia. He felt the helplessness of the situation, the injustice of a life lost prematurely. His friend's death was a harsh blow, a brutal reminder that the reality of the streets could be relentless and cruel. But it wasn't just individual tragedies that confronted Ricardo. He also saw society's indifference towards the homeless. People hurried past on the streets, avoiding eye contact with those living on the margins of society. He wondered how many times he himself had done the same before his transformation. The confrontation with reality was a mirror that reflected not only the external hardships of the homeless, but also his own flaws and privileges. He began to question his own choices and values, realizing that being wealthy was not just about money, but about perspective and responsibility towards others. On a particularly cold night, while waiting in line for a hot soup distributed by a local charity organization, Ricardo saw a group of well-dressed young people pass by him. They laughed and chatted animatedly, oblivious to the suffering around them. Ricardo felt a mix of sadness and anger. He wanted to shout at them, to shake them and show them the reality that so many ignored. But then he remembered his greater purpose. He wasn't there to judge or condemn, but to teach an important lesson to his own children. He took a deep breath, letting the frustration dissipate. He knew he still had much to learn and share before he could confront his children with the full extent of his experiences on the streets. Ricardo knew that the confrontation with reality was not just a test of physical endurance, but a test of his own compassion and empathy. He was determined to use this experience to change not only his children's lives, but also his own, in ways he could not yet fully imagine. It's a sunny afternoon when Emily and Thomas, still impacted by the scene they witnessed, decide to do something they never thought they would do. They return to the area where they saw the homeless gathered. Emily's heart beats fast as she spots the older man who had been moved the night before. She approaches hesitantly, her face reflecting uncertainty about how to start such an unexpected conversation. "Do you mind if we sit with you?" she asks softly, to which the man looks up, surprised by her presence but welcoming. Sure, he responds with a shy smile. Sitting down beside him, Emily finds herself immersed in a deep and unexpectedly personal conversation. She listens to the challenges he has faced, the dreams that have faded away, and the daily struggle to find some dignity in that difficult life. Every word resonates within her, touching places of compassion that have never been awakened before. Meanwhile, Thomas engages in lively conversation with one of the mothers he had seen earlier, playing with her children. He helps build a small makeshift tent with old sheets and boxes, and sees the grateful smile of the mother, whose eyes reveal a mix of hope and resignation. Thomas never knew that a simple play tent could mean so much to someone. Throughout the afternoon, Emily and Thomas not only listen but actively participate in the lives of these people who were once invisible to them. They share humble meals, hear stories of struggle and resilience, and find joy in the small things they once completely ignored. At every moment, they realize that life is not just about material wealth, but also about genuine human connections and empathy. As night falls and they bid farewell to their new friends, Emily and Thomas exchange meaningful glances. They know that something fundamental has changed within them that day. They are beginning to understand the privilege they possess and the responsibility that comes with that wealth. More than that, they feel a deep desire to do more, not just to give back, but to be agents of change in a world that often forgets the most vulnerable. As they head home that night, the silence between them is comfortable and filled with new questions and reflections. The path to personal transformation is just beginning, but they are determined to move forward with open hearts and a new understanding of what truly matters in life. Time has passed since that transformative day. Emily and Thomas, still absorbed by the experiences that profoundly changed them, feel their father's presence in a new way. They observe him with renewed eyes, curious about his thoughts and actions since that unexpected encounter on the city streets. One evening, during a family dinner, the atmosphere is different. Their father seems contemplative, watching his children with a mix of pride and concern. Emily and Thomas exchange quick glances, wondering if their father also remembers that special day that changed everything for them. Finally, after dinner, their father invites them to sit in the living room. His serious demeanor and carefully chosen words indicate that something important is about to happen. He begins to speak about the importance of empathy, compassion, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. "Do you remember that day in the city?" he asks gently. Emily and Thomas nod, their minds returning to vivid images of the stories and faces they encountered that day. "I was there with you," he continues, seeing the surprise on his children's faces. He explains how, concerned about the direction their lives were taking, he decided to take a drastic step to teach a lesson he believed was crucial to their growth. He talks about his disguise, the hardships he faced on the streets, and, most importantly, the life lessons he learned alongside the homeless. Emily and Thomas listen in silence, their minds filled with new insights about their father and themselves. They realize that love and concern for them were the motivation behind it all. More than ever, they feel the depth of their father's sacrifice and dedication to shape their hearts and minds. As the revelation of the plan unfolds before them, Emily and Thomas feel a mix of emotions. There is admiration for their father's courage, gratitude for being blessed with such love and opportunities, and a renewed desire to honor what they have learned with meaningful actions. The silence that follows the revelation is filled not with discomfort, but with mutual understanding and a deeper connection between father and children. They are united not only by blood, but by a shared experience that has changed them forever, strengthening family ties and laying the groundwork for a future where empathy and humility will be essential guides in their lives. The days following the revelation of the plan are marked by a reflective silence in the family home. Emily and Thomas, now aware of their father's sacrifice and deep concern, often find themselves lost in thought. Their interactions with friends and the world around them have a new layer of sensitivity, a heightened awareness of the realities many face daily. Emily, during a visit to school, notices stark differences between herself and her peers. She realizes how superficial conversations about designer clothes and luxury vacations now seem hollow. She finds herself more interested in the stories of people crossing her path, seeking to understand their struggles and hopes. Meanwhile, Thomas immerses himself in volunteer projects in the local community. He joins a group that distributes food to the homeless and participates in events to raise awareness about the importance of aiding the needy. Each moment spent in service brings him a sense of fulfillment that money could never buy. When they are together, Emily and Thomas share their discoveries and reflections with their father. They discuss how they can do more, not just as individuals but as a family. Their father listens with a gentle smile, proud of how his children are internalizing the lessons he had hoped they would learn. The house, once filled with luxury and material comfort, begins to resonate with a new kind of wealth. The wealth of genuine human connections, shared empathy, and a renewed commitment to making a difference in the world. Each family member finds a new direction in life guided by the understanding that, while they may have started from different points in life, everyone deserves respect and dignity. As weeks turn into months, Emily and Thomas continue to grow, not just in age but also in wisdom and compassion. They know their journey of transformation is just beginning, and that the impact of a single act of kindness can resonate far beyond what they ever imagined. A Saturday afternoon at the Millionaire family mansion brings a different atmosphere. The golden sun streams through the tall windows, painting patterns of light and shadow across the main hall. Emily and Thomas, alongside their father, sit around the dining table, sharing a simple yet meaningful meal. Since discovering their father's true identity and the transformative journey he embarked upon, the family dynamics have profoundly changed. There is no longer distance between them, only renewed closeness and a mutual understanding that transcends words. During the meal, they reminisce about the moments from that encounter on the streets to the present day. Emily shares how her interactions at school are now more meaningful, focused on helping and understanding her peers in ways she never imagined before. Thomas talks about his volunteer work and how each grateful smile from the homeless fills him with a sense of true purpose. Their father smiles as he listens, knowing that his children are growing not just in age, but also in compassion and empathy. He admires how they have embraced the lessons he tried to teach, turning challenges into opportunities for personal growth and meaningful connections. As the evening progresses, they begin discussing plans for the future. Together, they decide to start a family project to help those in need in their community. Emily suggests organizing fundraising events, while Thomas proposes establishing a regular food distribution program. These plans are not just vague ideas. They are firm commitments to use their privileges to make a difference. They know that with hard work and dedication, they can create a tangible positive impact, not only in their own lives but also in the lives of those around them. As the night draws to a close, the family rises from the table with a sense of contentment and hope. They walk together through the corridors illuminated by moonlight, aware that this is just the beginning of a journey of reconciliation, growth, and service that will strengthen not only family bonds but also the fabric of the community they are now committed to supporting. Click on the videos that are being recommended to you now.